Putting aside biases, how has India really developed as a country? Whether it's on short video platforms or in the news, it's difficult to get a complete understanding of India. Friends who have lived there would have a clearer understanding. Are there any friends who could share some insights? In 1962, India's per capita GDP was 18% of the world average. In 2022, India's per capita GDP was 19% of the world average. Basically, there's been little development. I remember there was a news report a few years ago that said the richest man in Asia was an Indian. The question is that India's GDP is only 1/5 of China's, but it has nurtured the richest man in Asia. What does this show? It shows that India's wealth gap is much more severe than China's. It shows that the fruits of India's economic growth are only enjoyed by a few people. It shows that Indian capitalists are much harsher in exploiting their own people. It is said that many Indians brag about this online with complacency, which just shows that there is something wrong with their minds.
I'd like to provide a perspective. Comparing India and China from a military-industrial standpoint, India's current per capita GDP is roughly equivalent to Chinese level in 2004, adjusted for inflation in US dollars. In 2004, Chinese G-10 fighter jet had already made its maiden flight 6 years ago, and was starting to be produced in earnest. Apart from the engine, all other components were domestically produced. G-10 continued to undergo improvements and became a mainstay fighter jet of the Chinese Air Force, with its engines eventually being replaced entirely by domestically produced WS-10BC models. Now, G-10 has Xibai aircraft in service and has been exported to Pakistan. It is rumored to have outperformed European Typhoon fighter jets in recent joint exercises between the Pakistani and Qatar Air Forces. In contrast, India's LCA-Tejas fighter jet also entered production in 2024, but its core components are all imported, and its overall performance lags behind G-10 by a significant margin. The Indian Air Force, under pressure from Modi, reluctantly ordered dozens of Tejas fighter jets, but the delivery numbers from Hindustan Aeronautics are far below plan, and there are no signs of improvement. In 2004, China's third-generation main battle tank, the Type 99, had been in service for over 4 years, and all of its components were domestically produced. By 2024, India's independently developed Arjun main battle tank had not yet entered service due to various technical issues. Moreover, the Arjun tank's engine, gun barrel, and infrared night vision system are all imported in 2004. China's first Aegis-class destroyer, the Type 04C, equipped with the Aegis tactical management system, active phased array radar, and vertical missile launch system, had been launched for a year, basically catching up with the naval standard of Europe and the United States. By 2024, India's most advanced PU destroyer had also entered service, but its radar and air defense missiles were supplied by Israel. Its engines were from Ukraine and the United Kingdom. Its main guns, torpedoes, and helicopters were from Russia. Its sonar was French, and its anti-ship missiles were jointly developed with Russia. India still has to import basic equipment such as rifles, bullets, artillery shells, and grenades. In contrast, in 2004, most of the equipment used by the Chinese military had been domestically produced for many years, and some equipment had already caught up with international advance levels. The military-industrial sector is a reflection of a country's industrial strength from a military-industrial perspective. India is undoubtedly the undisputed leader among developing countries worldwide, excluding China. This is because no other developing country has such ambitious weapons research and development aspirations. Although India's domestically produced weapons are mostly assembled, the fact that they can be assembled demonstrates a certain level of system engineering capability. After all, it's not easy to combine various components and ensure stable operation. However, when compared to China, India's military-industrial capabilities become insignificant. Like a firefly in the sun. In fact, India's situation is typical of a developing country. China, on the other hand, is definitely an outlier among developing countries. To be honest and practical, if India does not import Western components, India would not be able to produce a single second-generation fighter jet today. India would not be able to build a single outdated destroyer of the Luda class today. India would not be able to produce a single second-generation tank today. India would not be able to produce a single artillery gun from the World War II era today. India's establishment preceded Chinese, and it inherited a solid material foundation from the British. However, Can India currently produce ballpoint pen refills? India's weapons are a mixture of nations, lacking a complete military industry, and basically relying on purchases for its weapons. China, founded on a semi-colonial and semi-feudal basis, with steel-making capabilities far inferior to India's, has now become the world's largest producer of industrial goods, and a country with a complete industrial chain. Does India possess the same? China has comprehensively addressed poverty issues and eliminated absolute poverty, whereas New Delhi in India has the world's largest slum, undoubtedly ranking first globally in terms of slum. Any discussion about India replicating China's rise to power fundamentally lacks an understanding of how China achieved its own development. China's rise is not a unique case. Previously, Japan and the four Asian tigers, South Korea, Hong Kong, and Singapore, have successfully demonstrated the East Asian model of catching up and surpassing China, with its current per capita GDP of $500, has already traveled more than half of the path. Understanding China's rise requires placing it within the framework of the East Asian model, excluding Hong Kong and Singapore, which are city-states benefiting significantly from extensive entrepot trade. Numerous works have been written since the issue 90s on the East Asian model, focusing primarily on two key points: establishing a cash cow, leveraging the demographic dividend to establish an export-oriented industrial sector, depressing the exchange rate, achieving long-term trade surpluses, and earning foreign exchange. This foreign exchange is then used to purchase commodities, such as coal, oil, non-ferrous metals, and iron ore, and advanced technologies on the international market, emphasizing education and scientific research, R&D, for industrial upgrading, gradually moving up the value chain, and occupying high-value added segments, transforming the demographic dividend into an engineering dividend, upgrading exports from clothing and footwear to electromechanical equipment, and ultimately to crown jewels of industrial manufacturing. The United States has long maintained an R&D intensity of 2.8% of GDP, Japan at 3%, over 3%, and South Korea at 4%. China's R&D intensity reached 2.64% in 2023, catching up with the United States. Without significant investment in R&D, there can be no technological development or industrial upgrading. Expecting established, developed countries to hand over high-value industrial chains is naive. They are more likely to suppress your industrial upgrading efforts. Japan, the four Asian tigers, and China have all encountered significant trade frictions during the development processes. Some argue that India's per capita GDP is comparable to China's in 2004. However, in 2004, China already possessed a powerful export-oriented industrial sector. After joining the World Trade Organization in 2001, Chinese industrial products flooded the global market by 2004. Whereas India's export-oriented industrial sector in 2023, India is even hesitant to join the regional comprehensive economic partnership. If China had such an opportunity like theirs in 2004, it would have jumped at the chance. Secondly, China's R&D intensity was 1.23% in 2004, while India's was only 0.7% in 2023. One shows ambition, while the other lags behind at the third world level. China surpassed the European Union in R&D intensity in 2018, and is now closing on the United States, with 2.26% in 2023. After the Second World War, only a few examples from East Asia have successfully transformed from developing to developed statuses. Among those with a significant population, only South Korea, with a population of 50 million, has achieved this transition. In contrast, over 100 countries have fallen into the middle-income trap. If you want to emulate a top student's academic success, you need to follow their study methods, don't you? India's current situation suggests that it expects to replicate the successful path of a top student, while avoiding the hard work involved. Such expectations are unrealistic. India's aspiration for a prominent global position would be better served by praying to the god of Hindu mythology.